Commander Zekthul of the Voldrian Elite Strike Force adjusted his thermal camouflage as he studied the human settlement through his targeting scope. For 3 cycles, their intelligence division had insisted that the mining colony on Gamma Centauri 7 was defended by a single human maintenance worker named Jake Sullivan, who had somehow convinced the Galactic Council to grant him exclusive mining rights to the entire asteroid belt. Confirmed target assessment. Zekthul spoke into his comm unit, his mandibles clicking with irritation. 1 human. No military background. No enhanced cybernetics. No combat training. Confirmed, Commander, came the reply from Intelligence Officer Vexara aboard their stealth cruiser. Human designation, Jacob Jake Sullivan, age 34, former space dock mechanic. Claims to have inherited the mining rights from his deceased uncle. No weapons permits on file. Zekthul's 4 eyes narrowed as he watched the human in question emerge from a ramshackle habitat module, wearing nothing but coveralls and carrying what appeared to be a bottle of fermented grain alcohol. The human was tall for his species, with unkempt brown hair and a beard that suggested he hadn't seen proper grooming facilities in months. He moved with the casual swagger of someone completely unaware that 6 of the galaxy's most elite soldiers were preparing to kill him. "This has to be some kind of joke," muttered Sergeant Crix from his position on the eastern ridge. "The Humans Corporate Consortium is willing to pay 50 million credits to eliminate this." "Orders are orders," Zekthul replied, though privately he agreed. The consortium had claimed that Sullivan was somehow interfering with their expansion into the Centauri system using unconventional tactics that violated 17 interstellar treaties. But looking at the human stumbling around his mining equipment with a drink in his hand, Zekthul couldn't imagine what threat he possibly posed. "Alpha Team, move to position," Zekthul commanded. "Remember, the consortium wants this to look like an accident. Mining explosions happen all the time." Jake Sullivan set his beer down on the makeshift workbench outside his habitat and scratched his beard as he watched 6 barely visible heat signatures move into position around his little settlement. His uncle's old detection grid was still working perfectly, even if everything else on this rock was held together with duct tape and prayer. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered, taking a long swig from his bottle. Corporate finally sent the big guns. The Voldrian Strike Force was legendary throughout this arm of the galaxy. 6-limbed warriors with natural camouflage, enhanced reflexes, and enough firepower to level a small city. They'd never failed a mission, never left a target alive, and were supposedly invisible to all known detection methods. Jake chuckled and activated his uncle's old communication array. "Hey there, boys," he said conversationally into the transmitter. "All planning to stand around out there much longer, or are we gonna get this party started?" Through his scope, Zekthul watched the human wave cheerfully in his general direction. Impossible. Their camouflage was military grade, designed to fool even enhanced optics. "Target has somehow detected our presence," Zekthul reported grimly. "Moving to immediate engagement. All units, weapons free." The strike team emerged from concealment with military precision, their energy rifles trained on the human who stood calmly beside his mining equipment. Jake raised his hands in mock surrender, still holding his beer. "Now hold on there, fellas," Jake said with an easy grin. "Before you'll start shooting up my property, I've got a proposition for you." "You are in violation of corporate mining claims," Zekthul announced, his voice amplified by his suit speakers. "Surrender now, and your death will be quick." Jake tilted his head thoughtfully. "Yeah, about that. See, the thing is, this whole asteroid belt belongs to me legal-like. Got the papers and everything. But I reckon the corporate boys didn't tell you the whole story about what happened to the last 3 enforcement teams they sent out here." Sergeant Crix's thermal readings spiked with amusement. "Is the human attempting to intimidate us?" There is no record of previous corporate operations in this sector. Oh, they wouldn't keep records, Jake said, his grin widening. Kind of embarrassing when your high-tech mercenaries get their asses handed to them by a space mechanic with a bad attitude and too much time on his hands. Ziegthal had heard enough. Eliminate the target. That's when Jake Sullivan turned to his beer bottle, raised it in a mock toast, and spoke the words that would become legend throughout the Centauri system. Hold my beer. What happened next would be analyzed by military strategists for decades. Jake tossed his bottle to the ground and dove behind his mining rig, just as the first energy bolts seared the air where he'd been standing. But instead of seeking cover, he began throwing switches on equipment that the strike force had dismissed as primitive mining machinery. The first surprise was when the mining laser rotated 90 degrees and vaporized Trooper Zol's cover. The second was when the ore processing plant opened like a flower to reveal a military-grade particle cannon that had been surplus from the Terran Defense Force. What in the seven hells cricks began before a gravity mine disguised as a waste container activated and sent him tumbling into the asteroid's weak gravity well? Jake's voice echoed across the settlement through speakers hidden in the mining equipment. See, the thing about us humans is, we're real good at making dangerous things look harmless. My Uncle Eddie was paranoid as a cat in a doghouse, rest his soul. The habitat module split down the middle, revealing an automated defense turret that began tracking the remaining squad members with ruthless efficiency. The communications array unfolded into a sensor jamming station that cut off their connection to the orbiting cruiser. Impossible. Ziegthal snarled, diving behind a rock formation as plasma bolts chewed up the ground around him. Intelligence said no weapons. Well, Jake's voice replied cheerfully, technically, it's all mining equipment. I mine asteroids, you mine my patience, and this here gravity cannon mines the structural integrity of your bones when it hits ya. The ore conveyor belt Jake was hiding behind suddenly rose on hydraulic lifts, revealing itself as a mobile weapons platform. He stood atop it like some kind of demented asteroid pirate, wielding what looked suspiciously like a modified plasma torch. "You'll pick the wrong space hillbilly to mess with," Jake declared, and opened fire. 20 minutes later, Commander Ziegthal found himself zip-tied to a mining support beam, watching his remaining squad members receive basic first aid from the same human they'd been sent to eliminate. Their weapons were stacked neatly nearby, next to Jake's freshly opened beer. "Nothing personal, boys," Jake said, sitting down on a crate of what was definitely not mining explosives. "But corporate's been trying to run me off for 6 months now. Figure it was time to send a message." You're insane," Ziegthal gasped, still trying to process how a lone human had defeated an elite military unit using disguised garbage and sheer audacity. Jake grinned and raised his beer in another mock toast. "Nah, partner. I'm just a space mechanic with a really good teacher and a serious lack of common sense. But hey, thanks for the workout. Gets lonely out here." As Jake radioed the galactic peacekeepers to come collect his prisoners, Ziegthal made a mental note to himself. If he survived this mission, he was definitely updating the species threat assessment for humans. Specifically, he was adding a new category, unpredictable and armed with improvised weapons. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a small voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, the galaxy had seriously underestimated what happened when you cornered a human who'd had too much time, too much beer, and access to power tools.